What's up, and welcome back to Nowstalgia Pod. We're giving you your weekly look at what's going on in pop culture. My name is Patch G, and I am here, as always, with my co-host, Dave Martin Swagger. Dave, what's going on, man?
It's a never-ending story, man. How are you doing today?
I'm good. Dave's alluding to Stranger Things 3, which we're going to be talking about the second half. We reviewed the first half last week, so check that out on our YouTube breakout. We're also going to be talking some albums and Aziz Ansari stand-up special today. But before we jump into any of that, hit that subscribe button if you're watching on YouTube. Go to soundcloud.com/nostalgiapod to find all the ways to check out the podcast and give us a 5-star rating and review on iTunes. Also follow the pod at NowstalgiaPod on Twitter, where we talk about all the news, notes, and stuff going on in the pop culture world. Dave, Big K.R.I.T dropped a new album. K.R.I.T is here. Interesting title name, since it was his first mixtape was K.R.I.T is Coming. Is that correct? So
yeah. He's used his name a lot like that. Yeah, he likes to use it as an acronym. I never remembered what it stood for, because he does have his name as an acronym, K.R.I.T. So, but yeah, he's we haven't actually talked about him on the pod, but he's been around a long time. Obviously, he dropped an album back 2017. We just missed it, but yeah, this was kind of unexpected for me. K.R.I.T is here, the fourth full length from him. Had you listened to him before?
Just singles here and there. I'd heard him on some features. I'm aware of 1999, Energy, Big, some of like the bigger songs, but not really familiar with his like deeper tracks, so to speak. Well, he's been around since he kind of blew up in 2005, or at least hit the scene in 2005, because he did that song with Ludacris, right? I think it was country shit.
Yep, exactly. And then, he was a 2011 XXL freshman, same cover as like Mac Miller, YG, Kendrick. Like he was like a minted as a new star long ago. But even before that, as you said, he kind of like existed in that like post Dirty South, Southern scene as a guy who's born and bred Mississippi and all about that country shit. he really owns his country identity throughout all his music. But it's kind of been a weird arc for him, just because that debut album, Live from the Underground in 2012, that was his Def Jam debut, and that was pretty lukewarmly received, given the hype he built through his mixtapes and his EPs and stuff. And after that, he kind of had a lot of issues with Def Jam. He released Catalactica, which I thought was all right. It was solid, but he just kind of like went away for a while. I mean, he opened up for Macklemore's first big tour. But other than that, he wasn't really heard from that much. And it just felt like kind of like a missed opportunity, given how deep and introspective he was for a Southern rapper, especially. But then 2017, post Def Jam split, Forever is a Mighty Long Time came out, and that was definitely Return to Form. Then he released a bunch of EPs last year, which we also didn't talk about. He put them on a TDT compilation right at the beginning of January this year, and he's back right again with K.R.I.T is here. And I've never been like the biggest fan. I always thought his music was a little dense at times, but he almost is kind of like a Southern Cole, you know? And I think the fact that they unite on this album for a song hopefully brings some Cole fans into the K.R.I.T orbit, just because I feel like it's a pretty close Venn diagram. So, what did you think diving in fully?
Yeah, I was surprised, and maybe this is singular for this album specifically, but I felt like there was a lot more singing, and it was a lot more jazz vibey than I was expecting. I was kind of expecting something a little more bangerish, just so to speak. I thought there was a lot of really good stuff on here, but it was so long, like 59 minutes. And I kind of started to lose a bit of the attention by the end. Just kind of wanted it to wrap up. I did really like the J. Cole song "Prove It," and I also really liked "K.R.I.T is Here" or "K.R.I.T Here," the first song. Right. Mm-hmm. But other than that, nothing really like stood out. But I was like, oh, this is. I was getting down to it. Just wasn't like popping out at me. How did you feel about the album though?
Yeah, it's the same thing with me. Like Forever is a mighty long time. That's damn near 90 minutes. And like it's not like Migos 90 minutes, like it's
Right.
really dense 90 minutes. And like you said, he's gotten a little more soulful in his later
Mm.
years. And that's cool. I'm glad to hear him branching out, but even leaving that aside, I just find sometimes that his shit's just a little dense for me sometimes. And like I know he's got a lot of hardcore fans. I've never been a hardcore fan, so it's like I always feel like you kind of want to ask them what they think of him because he's never really been a huge mainstream rap star or anything like that, despite being really well known. But the hardcores are the ones who I feel like have the most valuable opinion of Crit just because they've been like riding with him since those tapes. And like you said on this, it's easy to kind of fade in and out through this track list. Not a lot of features. That's usually normal. That's normal for him. And frankly, I think some of the bigger energy songs are songs that we had already heard because they were on those EPs from last year, Energy and Learn from Texas specifically. And I like those songs. Those songs are good. And again, Crit, when he brings it, when he brings the energy, when he brings like a faster flow like that, it does stand out because he is clearly a very competent technical rapper. But I don't know, just maybe it's just his beat choices for me. I almost just kind of get lost in his record. That's why I've never really fell in love with any of them. But the talent's still obviously very present. And I mean, if you're talking like active Southern rappers after like Killer Mike, I mean, really don't know who else you really will want to put up there with Big K.R.I.T in terms of like bars and lyrics and just talent and all that,
Yeah,
Tough.
it's interesting. I don't really think about him in that way. I feel like in a lot of senses, when he kind of burst onto the scene, he was someone that I think people talked about having a lot of potential and hasn't had that like one breakout album. Maybe I've kind of missed it, but I feel like he kind of gets forgotten. But it's interesting to hear you talk about him as being this very like established Southern rapper behind Killer Mike. It's I wonder, do you feel like it's that he hasn't had like the commercial success, but just like the quality and like the denseness has made it so that it's obvious that he's better than the commercial success would lead people to believe?
Yeah, I think that's kind of two sides of the same coin. When he signs with Def Jam, everyone was really excited to have the extra exposure put on Crit and
Mm-hmm.
off that huge mixtape run. And like, this is great. He'll be huge. And kind of live scratching your head about why it didn't happen. And part of that was because Live from the Underground wasn't that great. It was very disappointing at least. But he I really think Forever is a mighty long time. Like that got a lot of critical acclaim, but as you said, he's not a mainstream rap star, and I think partially it's that denseness. He never found a way to have more crossover success the way someone like a Ti did, or anything
Right.
like that, or Ludacris, obviously. And I think he's better pure rapper than Ludacris, obviously, but it's Ludacris has better records, and
Mm-hmm.
like I said, I think just Crit has those hardcore fans. There's a lot of those fans that will ride for him, and he kind of reminds me of like a non-mainstream Cole, as I said, a Southern non-popular Cole.
Mm-hmm.
And it's an interesting career because now that he's independent of Def Jam and he's on what's it called, Multi Alumni LLC under BMG, some kind of independent.
It's his own label.
Yeah, it's his own label. There you go. He's not hurting or anything. So it's just interesting to see what direction he wants to take stuff because the soulful stuff is newer. So he clearly is not interested in the success Def Jam probably promised him anyway. So I don't expect him to 360 anytime soon. But very interesting career from a lot of different angles.
Definitely. Why don't we move on to another interesting guy, Dev Hynes, aka Blood Orange. We reviewed Negro Swan last year, and we really liked it. And I think we were taken aback by the artistry of it and the way that Dev Hynes was able to really like meld these songs together and make this one very singular feeling piece of art that was still flourishing in so many different in so many different ways, throughout, and had these really interesting arrangements and just musicianry throughout. Then he drops Angel's Pulse this past weekend as a mixtape, and
Yes.
a guy that before was dropping projects every couple of years seemed to really want to like give people time to think about these things. Now dropping another project 1 year after his last one. What do you think of this new mixtape in comparison to Negro Swan?
Yeah, it's interesting just because he doesn't have any mixtapes to this point. He just has those 3 albums.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, when I heard that, and I also heard it explicitly labeled as a mixtape, something most people don't actually do these days, I was like, oh, this is an interesting way to communicate expectations and artistic intent in a way most artists don't think about these days. So we've talked about that before. Uh, I was very uh, intrigued because again, it's Blood Orange, it's Dev Hynes. He's not
Right.
putting out 30 songs a year or anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
Hearing him talk about it, he did do a fair bit of press. He talked to Craig Jenkins and a lot of other people about this. He's calling it like an afterword to Negro Swan, which I find very interesting because I didn't really think about Negro Swan that much at all while listening to Angel's Pulse. I thought it was definitely a different listen,
Mm-hmm.
in a positive way, at least for me. But yeah, very very unexpected. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, speaking of Craig Jenkins' article, I felt like he really described the album or this mixtape in a way that summarized it really well. It feels like you're listening to a radio, and it kind of like flicks in between songs quickly. That a lot of the songs don't. I think that there's a similarity to them, but a lot of songs feel very singular. Feel like there's not necessarily like a cohesiveness to the album as there was with Negro Swan, but that almost works to allow some more interesting things to come through. Um, and I do get that sense like you don't know what's coming up next, but it's going to be something that you want to listen to, or they're going to flick the station pretty quickly anyway. What songs on here stood out to you? You said that you liked this a little bit more than Negro, or at least like it stood out to you in a better way than Negro Swan.
Yeah. So I think what I liked about Angel's Pulse is that it was much more accessible later listen than a lot of
Mm-hmm.
his past work, which definitely just deals with a lot of more serious themes. And not to say that this is totally frivolous or anything, but I just thought maybe it's that radio vibe that was intended. I'm not sure, but it just sounded like it flowed in a just a simpler way,
Mm,
and I just kind of connected with that a little bit. I think partially there's a lot of features on this.
yeah.
Um, Dev feels like he's just kind of hanging out with the homies in a lot of instances here. But in a good way. Like I think track 3, Dark and Handsome with Toro Imoy, that song
Yeah.
ruled. I love that song a lot. You had Justine Sky on here twice. You have Tinashe on here twice. And then, Gold Teeth with Project Pat and Gangsta Boo and Tinashe. I was like, wow, shit. You wouldn't have heard this on uh, Negro Swan. Let's put it that way. It just wouldn't fit. But it was still a cool song to hear. Um, it's interesting to hear Dev vocally be like one of the main voices on a song. I feel like usually when he collaborates with people in the past, he's kind of been the background vocal or more of an arranger.
Mm-hmm.
He's not always like tag teaming a song with someone. So it was kind of cool to hear him do that with a lot of the guests on this. I was also very surprised to hear Joba from Brockhampton on
Yeah.
this.
On Take It Back.
Yeah, I can't remember any other Joba features outside the Brockhampton sphere to this point. And I wasn't looking at my phone when I wasn't on my phone when it popped up, and I did like the eyebrow raise gif. I was like, oh shit, how about that? That's cool. But yeah, even Dark and Handsome, he shouts out the people he lost in 18. Everyone's saying that's a reference to Mac Miller, who he had previously collaborated with.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I don't. Obviously, this doesn't have the ambition, the lyrical ambition of Negro Swan. And that's pretty obvious. Didn't really try and say otherwise. But I think it still sounds really cool. And because it's Dev Hynes, it just has like a high bar because the musical choices he makes are just unique in general. So, and what do you think? The presence of guests, the lighter tone of it all. What do you think?
Yeah, well, Negro Swan talked a lot about identity, and it talked a lot about um, the struggles of that and how there's a bleakness to it. And this album was so much later, like you already said. that it just was kind of a lot lighter to listen to. I felt like I was kind of floating through it and really able to like sink into the songs rather than kind of weighing the intellectual heaviness of something like Negro Swan. And I really like the features. I think they kind of brought out the best of Dev Hynes, especially Take It Back and Dark and Handsome, like you already pointed out. I think those two songs are just fantastic. I mean, Blood Orange at this point, and Dev Hynes just as a musical person in general, feels like he's really establishing himself as one of the most interesting artists out there. Only because I can't really think of a peer to him that sounds the way he does.
Steve Lacy wants to be Dev Hynes.
Yeah,
not there yet.
Yeah, that's actually a really good point. I think the internet altogether might be able to kind of channel that, but Dev is just such a a singular talent at this point. Mm-hmm. It's really interesting, and you got to hit that subscribe button to the Dev Hynes train because there's going to be some great stuff coming. We're going to put a couple of songs that sounds like Dark and Handsome and Take It Back will probably make it onto our 2019 best of 2019 on Spotify. Any last thoughts on this before we wrap up and head to your guy Ed Sheeran?
Yeah, don't you dare. Yeah, I just hope people don't miss it just because it was kind of a surprise announcement. There wasn't any singles as far as I know. And yeah, like 11 months later, probably people aren't looking for it if they're already fans. So make sure you spread the word on this one.
Absolutely. Spread the word. Someone that doesn't need your help spreading the word is, as I already said, Dave's favorite artist, Ed Sheeran, the greatest songwriter of our generation until yesterday. The movie came out and showed that. That it's really interesting to like be listening to an Ed Sheeran album so close to that movie.
It framed a lot of my thoughts, to be honest.
It did. And like I was thinking about, in that movie, he really does, or he's positioned as like this generation's Beatles, this songwriter and this amazing just creator of music. And I've never really seen Ed Sheeran that way. We talked about, what was it, Divide? Was that the last one?
Yeah, I don't even know if we talked about it, dog, to be honest. That was 2017. That was the last one he dropped.
We definitely talked about it.
Did we?
I remember.
One was Shape of You, of course.
Yes. At least what I remember, and maybe I'm just so podcasted, so like in the podcast zone now that every conversation I feel like we have is on the podcast. I remember us talking. Yeah, I remember us talking about how he's just this big sappy artist,
Yep.
Yeah, I don't know. I was listening to Number 6 Collaborations Project, which is, in a way a follow up to his 2011 Number 5 Collaborations Project, which I don't remember getting a lot of acclaim at the time, but also wasn't super tuned into Ed Sheeran at that point.
Well, that was an indie release. He had released all those EPs before even signing, so it was like before that the first debut album. So yeah, I'm not sure how many people are aware of it at all. In fact, this naming convention probably did force a lot of people to Google because like, what the fuck does this mean? It's kind of a obtuse title until you realize it's actually following something up.
and I mean, I guess I'll start with you. How did you feel about this album? Because I feel like you can kind of get the sense I'm a little exasperated.
Oh yeah, I mean, so am I. And like Ed Sheeran does not need us to talk about him at all. He's the number one artist on Spotify as soon as he dropped I Don't Care with Bieber. Divide from 17 with Shape of You was the best-selling album of 2017 and is the 8th best-selling album in the US of this decade. And this and Multiply are the 3rd and 4th best-selling UK albums of the decade behind Adele's 2 albums. Like, he is a international superstar in the biggest possible sense. And it really can't be overstated, the numbers this dude does. It's kind of insane. And he's only 28 years old, despite feeling like he's been in our lives 8 years at least. And he's got 4 Grammys. He's a star. He's a superstar. But I don't think he's ever had a good album.
Oh wow.
And like he has good songs you really can't deny. And even if you don't like, you're tired of hearing them because they got overplayed, they are still like, dynamite songs like Don't and Thinking Out Loud and
Mm-hmm.
A-Team, and I guess even Shape of You to a lesser extent. But as the singer songwriter type that he is, and he kind of has always blended genres. You can listen back to that number 5 collaborations project 2011. Featured on that is Devlin and Wiley, UK rap artists. He's always done the rap rock, putting his toe in that sphere since before he was famous, even though it got a lot more attention and hate than more recently. But I've always felt like his albums have just been a little lacking. Like he's always just kind of played it really safe, in terms of, as you said, just being a sap and making these kind of bland, emotional songs that connect with people, but he doesn't feel like he's trying that hard. I think he definitely has album deep cuts that like his real hardcore fans probably would really ride for. But at least I feel like for most of like the bigger singles, and I mean, you go to Divide, I think every one of those songs has its own Wikipedia entry. That's how much streaming it did, right? But I've never really been wowed by stuff. In fact, he almost stands out. Like obviously, his singer-songwriter is his identity, right? In the songwriting aspect, he kind of like sneaks up on you at times. Remember, "Love Yourself," Justin Bieber, famously written by Ed Sheeran, Grammy nominated, and all that, right? And that's one of those like, oh shit, this is actually like really really well done. And I just feel like I don't have that thought often on Ed's actual songs. And this number 6 collaborations project is Ed Sheeran just making a DJ Khaled album, except he's actually performing with all his guests. So in a sense, it's even safer. And he can just kind of float in on these songs and oftentimes get killed by his guests on said songs, but it's okay because he's Ed Sheeran. It doesn't actually matter. There are no stakes for him anymore.
Right. Edward Sheeran, another one. That's actually a funny visual. However, like, even though his guests obviously are the ones that stand out on this, there is something to be said for the way he's able to almost be this chameleon-like musician at this point, where he can kind of jump between genres, and even if you don't necessarily like the songs, it's not like he's unskilled or untalented. Like,
oh, certainly not.
It's pretty impressive, at least in that respect. And like you said, he works with a range of artists on this. I mean, he's got Camila Cabello, he's got the Cardi B on the same song, Chance, Stormzy, who, by the way, just headlined Glastonbury, which is just insane.
Very timely feature, let's put it that way.
Yeah.
Taking back to London. That's a good one.
Bieber, Travis Scott, LMI, her, Skrillex, which that song was tough. And then he ends it with Chris Stapleton and Bruno Mars. So he's got the star power on here. Did any of these songs stand out to you that you liked?
Yeah. So, and to your previous point, I think he is good at blending of the genre. And despite what the dude joked about in Yesterday about keeping it to the brothers in terms of rapping, as far as like pop rap crossover late hip hop goes, he's not bad at it. Even if it often can be quite cringy. I think he's a talented guy, and he's mixed sounds for such a long time that it doesn't feel like he's riding any new waves or anything. I would never charge him with that.
Right.
Now, I think a song like South of the Border, I think Camila and Cardi just take that song from him. Like, frankly, I've been thinking about it as the Camila song and listened to it a few times already. I really like that one because these are actually like really inspired features. I think a problem with Khaled albums, a problem with movie soundtrack albums these days, stuff like that, is they're all just phoned in verses. Half the time they're probably pre-recorded. Like, no one tried hard. They didn't need to. So they're just there for the bag. And while I feel like most of these people appreciate the bag they got from Ed Sheeran's label for this, they still all tried pretty hard. Like Camila and Cardi, I really liked. I really like Stormzy. Again, I think he references his Glasto set on this. That's also, I think, probably one of the better rap crossovers Ed's done. They actually switched flows, like they're Hove and Kanye and Gotta Have It. Like it was actually sounded quite good. Actually, I was quite impressed. And then Blow with Chris Stapleton and Bruno Mars, kind of an interesting song just because I think my problem with the album is it's a bit of a mess because nothing really sounds like
Oh
anything
yeah.
else. Maybe Ed's performances sometimes will sound the same, but the beats, the vocal deliveries from the guests are all over the place. That there's really no through line at all. And the last song being Blow with Chris Stapleton really going for it. And then Bruno just kind of mixing in.
Yeah.
It's
And
just interesting.
yeah, and I agree that it's a bit of a mess, and there's no like through line that kind of ties it all together. But Blow in particular feels like it belongs on a completely different project because it's just it comes in so hard in most of the songs, even if it's like Travis Scott or like Meek Mill and A Boogie on Thousand Nights. Um, these songs still sound like Ed Sheeran songs in terms of like the intensity and kind of like that pop folky with a hip hop beat underneath. But Blow just like this crazy guitar whirring rock song that's just like, okay, where's this coming from? I really feel like where Ed hits his stride in this album is when he's working in the R&B sphere. I feel like his song with Yeba, Best Part of Me, which is probably the softest song on the album, but stood out as one that I thought was pretty good. I thought both LMI and her give really good performances, and I especially liked her's performance on I Don't Want Your Money. I felt like those were the moments the album really shined. Like you said, though, when he's rapping, other than maybe with Stormzy, like Cross with Chance and P&B Rock, I thought was terrible. Antisocial, I mean, Travis Scott,
Bad.
just
Flat out bad.
Good. Just not good. So, I guess Meek stood out, but remember the name was probably the most cringeworthy one.
Oh,
just Eminem and 50 blatantly riding some coattails here. It's not good.
No, it's not like that one at all. A shout out given Jay Huss a feature. Shout out to UK. We got to remember Ed is an Englishman. But pairing Jay Huss with Thug is super weird. But I guess we shouldn't be surprised with the Old Town Road feature he just did. You said the Skrillex song is tough. I definitely agree with that. Travis features weird. Honestly, I think I Don't Care isn't good either. That song is huge. It's a big, really popular song right now. But it just feels like a very uninspired, bland performance from both Ed and Biebs. Like, there's nothing special about either of that. And I don't actually find it that catchy. So that was actually quite a disappointing song for me since it first came out. Khalid, nothing to speak of really from him. But yeah, I feel like for the Ed fans, they're just happy to hear new stuff. It's been about 2 years. And because of most of these features are actually pretty inspired, I think fans of those artists will probably latch on to some of these songs too. So it's probably wrong to call the album anything but a success. It's clearly going to be a success for him. But I do find it was pretty safe, at least from Ed's performance angle of it all.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. Why don't we move on to something that wasn't as safe? Aziz Ansari's new stand-up special. Aziz Ansari, back with his first special since the allegations came out early last year, 2018, about sexually aggressive behavior. The special is called Right Now, dropped on Netflix Tuesday, July 9th. Dave, I know that you saw him live. Obviously, no recordings, because that's kind of been the MO for these shows. You have to put the phones away in the box. How did you feel about the special compared to what you saw?
Yeah, so I saw him in the Boston area back in, when was that? February, March, something like that. And I just want to figure out exactly when that was. Yeah, February. And honestly, this was a very, very similar routine. A lot of these jokes may have been referenced online leading up to this special, but it was obviously a much tighter routine because they shot this over 3 nights in Brooklyn in May. So you had, 40 more shows, 50 more shows to hone in on this routine. And there were some jokes that I heard that weren't in this one, as well as some new ones, just a few. So, but overall, yeah, it seems like he was definitely building to this moment, very much thought out. So Some of the jokes didn't quite hit as hard for me because I had already heard them before, especially in a live setting. That's come to be expected. But what did you think coming at most of this from the first time?
Yeah, it's interesting. He starts off the show right, almost with this whisper, and it's a very stylistic, or very stylized comedy special, because you have Spike Jones directing it. The cameraman is literally almost in Aziz's face. He's sitting on this stool, a lot different than his usual, like up tempo, walking around, kind of eccentric, erratic energy. And he starts off almost like I said with this whisper, and he's talking about Hassan Minaj and being confused for him, and then reluctantly saying, "Yeah, that's me. I'm Master of None guy. Treat yourself guy." And then he said, "Oh, and you had that sexual aggression allegation." He's like, "Oh no, that was Hassan." And then he goes into this whole thing about his experience with it, about how he felt so alone, how he felt so scared, but mostly just felt terrible for the girl and her experience in it. But maybe there was some good that came out of it because he knows it's caused some other people to reflect, and it kind of sets the tone. He shifts it very quickly, but that's obviously at the center of all of this. And even when he veers off into some of that patented silliness that I think we all have come to know and appreciate, and has helped make him a very public a comedian, a very successful comedian, it's always kind of at the forefront of the special is these allegations, and how that kind of hangs over his head throughout. This was what I found really interesting. How did you feel like he handled all that throughout the special?
Yeah, so I had heard, obviously, a pretty similar variation of that when I saw him, and that I got picked up on culture sites when he first gave that little speech. I think it was in the New York City show, I want to say. And yeah, I thought it came off as very thoughtful. I know it's interesting because read any reviews as they started to come out on the special. This allegation from Babe.net is obviously framing everyone's consumption of the special and the discourse around it, and I think it should, obviously. And the key to, I think, take away is because some people are just like very angry that Aziz is being given another platform by Netflix and has seemingly found his regular success once again with a global tour the past few months. And I think his thoughts on the matter and how he shared them come off as very thoughtful and remorseful. He doesn't come across as defensive or bitter at all. And that's contrary to the way someone like Louis C.K. has carried himself recently.
Yeah.
And also remind you once again that Aziz, what he purportedly did was not the same as someone who was a predator. Like he's been wrapped up in the MeToo movement, but it's very much in a gray area because the interpretation of the severity of the situation depends on who you ask, whether that's male or woman,
Yep.
And it's a quite polarizing thing. There are some people that think it should be totally dismissed, and some people think it should be totally canceled. And I think obviously it's a little in the middle. You shouldn't totally dismiss it. And he's right to point out that overall, the greater talking point around what he did, something that wasn't actually criminal, still is wrong. And I think a lot of people perhaps have done that unwillingly. And I think he is right to say that that is some kind of positive takeaway. Now, some people won't be happy with that. And I think a common thing I've seen is, well, he could be handling it worse, but it's a bit of a low bar. And I think ultimately you just kind of have to judge him for the way he's carried himself, especially given the other people or he's looped around with. So I like the way he sprinkled it in both in the beginning and in the end of the special, and also because as the jokes progress and we get more to a lighter tone, he's talking a lot about textbook things he's talked about before, generally, modern observations, of course. And part of that is, woke culture, right? And he doesn't come across as like bitter or mad about woke culture in the way it affected him. Again, that's something that Louis C.K. has, kind of railed against recently in his return. So, yeah, I like the way he handled it. I think it was done pretty tastefully and honestly.
Yeah, it's hard, I think, um, to look at a special like this because it's so rehearsed, and you can tell it's so rehearsed. And other than the few times things seem spontaneous, like the Justin Tyler moment, or like the girl in the crowd who yells "funny" and like Aziz like calls that out. You can tell that he knew all the beats, that he had been practicing this, and because of that, it can kind of make these thoughts, even though they are genuine, seem a bit rehearsed and seem a bit like they aren't coming necessarily from the heart in that moment. But I do think that what he gets at and the way he presents it and the tone he takes with it, bringing it down to that serious level, not trying to really make light of it, especially at the beginning or end. And even when he does touch on some headier topics later, I think he always kind of brings it back to himself in ways. And I think he handled it as well as anyone in the situation could have. It's such a difficult line to walk,
Right.
because of all the points that you made before. I thought that he shifted very quickly into the set, which I actually was glad because, I mean, first of all, I had to turn the volume on my TV up like 20 extra decibels just to hear him. He was talking so low, but also because I wanted to get back into Aziz and hear more of the jokes he had to say. And I felt like the jokes he delivered were good observations. I do think he whiffed a little bit, especially when talking about like R. Kelly and Michael Jackson, in terms of bringing that back to himself and how the way fans might be perceiving the things that R. Kelly and Michael Jackson are doing he might be receiving some of that treatment in certain ways because of people just going to the whole cancel culture right away and not really looking further into the facts. But a lot of the jokes landed really well, and I don't think he's missed a beat comedically. And if anything, I feel like he's matured in terms of how he tells these stories and tells the jokes and the observations he's going through. How did you feel about like the content of the jokes throughout?
Yeah, and speaking to the maturity of it all, towards the back half when he starts talking about his grandmother with Alzheimer's and then seeing his parents and not seeing them enough, kind of feels like the more learned worldly Aziz that perhaps we got touched on around Master of None season 2. He definitely feels like a different guy than he was when he was selling out MSG like only half a dozen comics ever have, and I think the way it just really felt like he was sincere with a lot of like the jokes. Like I actually felt like he kind of like believed the way he was feeling. Like some of the I thought like the progressive Candy Crush stuff I saw when he performed. Like I think that's just really funny stuff. But he's not like coming at it in like a bitter way, and he's also not being like a both sides police kind of guy either. It just kind of feels like he's just coming like from his perspective about like there's a time and a place for when to discuss things, like when he makes the brunch comment, stuff like that. Yeah, so I think overall, like a lot of the jokes, yeah, they just feel smarter just because they've changed because Aziz, as he said, has changed as well. Now that he's in his mid-30s. I like the Crazy Rich Asians joke.
Yeah, 12 points lower. 12 points lower.
The swastika pizza one. I saw that one live.
That
that one worked with the clapping one in my venue as well. Yeah, it's but like also like kind of like a classic Aziz things. Things don't just become racist when the white people figure it out. You know, and I think that was kind of a smart way to touch on Apu in Simpsons. Something like speaks back to the Indians on TV Master of None episode. He's talked about this stuff before, and I think people have come at him to directly denounce the Simpsons creators and the way they've handled that. I think he just did it in his own way, and I think the whole point of it was fucked up 30 years ago. We just didn't have a platform back then. It's cutting, but it's smart and it's correct. So I think just overall the maturity and more, I guess, top level observations stand out. And yeah, so you didn't think the R. Kelly Michael Jackson stuff landed as well? Because it is an interesting juxtaposition of how people are much more apt to dump R. Kelly than MJ, and how much of that is just because of the music quality difference,
No, I actually think the jokes around it landed very well. I think, especially when he started poking fun at himself in terms of all the times he mentioned R. Kelly and how much
Yeah.
he loved R. Kelly. I thought that was hilarious. And also how he kept going back to what he like Jeff Greenberg or whatever he named that guy, or whatever the guy's name was. And how he canceled Michael Jackson, but it took like 1,000 kids before he was willing to like draw that line,
Right.
I thought that was funny. Where I felt like he just missed a little bit is because connecting back to himself and the things that he's experienced. I felt like there was a bit of a through line. He could have kind of pulled it back together a little bit more, but I also can understand him not wanting to necessarily so closely associate himself with those two, especially with the year that they both had. Michael Jackson obviously not here to experience it, and R. Kelly very much experiencing it.
I've had a rough year as it is.
Just to go back to one joke, that probably the joke I laughed the hardest at was when he was talking about how he was the first Indian person he saw on MTV. But he said, well, actually the second, the bassist from No Doubt, but you know how that band plays it, Don't Speak. And just the way he delivered that, I was like dying on my couch. I thought that was so good. An interesting thing I was talking about with my girlfriend Julianne as we watched it. Do you think that this is going to be kind of like what kicks off the next phase of like shows and Aziz content moving forward? He has, even though he's been touring internationally and doing these somewhat underground shows, he's been pretty dormant, especially in the public eye. I mean, he's been doing shows, but not as that's not as accessible as something like Master of None, which is on a platform almost most people in the United States have access to.
So he did a lot of shows the past few months, all over the place, not just major cities, really. And now that he's done that run and been seen by scores of people, and now he has a front page Netflix special once again. He's definitely back in that sense. But if you remember, even before everything hopped off last year, his social media game went off a cliff and just really became promotional. So he kind of felt like he was kind of out of the loop by design. Point back to Master of None, a show that Netflix immediately said, yes, we'll do it again if Aziz and Alan want to make it. And they didn't really comment much on it. They're like, yeah, maybe one day, So I think now he's in a moment, and Lena Waithe has come in support of him, of course. And part of me thinks maybe the Master of None season 3 call happens this year. Like, we'll find out if it's coming back at all. But then again, maybe he'll just keep it cool again. I don't know. He had his head down all of last year for reasons that he didn't choose to, obviously. But now, maybe he has other projects in mind. I'm not really sure. But yeah, it just kind of feels like he's just kind of like a superstar that's likes to pull back a little bit. It's kind of, connects to a lot of his humor now about the internet and everything, and just how he's, I don't know, and like the finer moments that you let slip by. It kind of feels like he's shifted in his celebrity. So whether that affects his creative output, who can say? We're not really going to know anything until he officially wants us to.
Yeah, I think especially with the way he ended the special, talking about wanting to be more in the moment, wanting to enjoy things more. I could see him dropping this, taking a little bit of time for himself. And like you said, kind of just making projects at the pace that he feels, because he doesn't really need to be working if he doesn't want to be. And I would love to get another season of Master of None. And I think especially with what he's gone through, I feel like he could he has that life experience that I think he could make an interesting television season about. But I think he probably also would want to handle it very delicately and thoughtfully. So probably won't be hearing from him too soon, but we'll be anticipating when we do. What about Spike Jonze? I mean, just kind of, I was surprised that he directed it. I want to see him making more movies.
Yeah, he's only made like a few movies since the 90s. It's kind of annoying. Like, he makes so many music videos and stuff like this. Yeah, man, Spike Jonze, work more.
Seriously, yeah. What, Her was his last major?
Yeah, 2013.
6 years ago. Man, he needs to make another movie because every time he does, too, it's so interesting. Even his music videos are really interesting. Oh, I forgot he did that whole video short for the Arcade Fire.
Didn't need to do that. Let's be real.
I mean, it was The Suburbs. That's a good album. LCD Sound System, Jay-Z, Kanye. Oh, he did the Otis video? Wow.
I didn't know that.
Iconic.
Yep.
There's some good stuff on this filmography. Anyways, Aziz, we're glad he's back. Check out the special. All right, so moving off Aziz Ansari, on to another Netflix original, Stranger Things 3. We go to our YouTube page, was it youtube.com/nostalgiapod, and check out our breakout for the first half of the season. With these Netflix shows that are so bingeable, it's hard to break them up in a way that everybody can kind of get down to. So we wanted to not do it all at once and kind of do half season. Pretty much, I think the summary of the first half was it was good to be back with the gang and kind of see where the storylines were going. And second half, Dave, how are you feeling about the end of Stranger Things 3?
Yeah, so I enjoyed the whole season. I enjoyed my time in Hawkins, as it were. But I think the thing that excites me most is the prospect of where the show leaves off and the question of whether the Duffer Brothers and Netflix and co. will actually commit to a true shakeup as they're suggesting, namely Hopper being dead elsewhere, something. Mm-hmm. 11 not having her powers right now. The buyers leaving, moving somewhere else. I think, as we said in the first half of this season talk, season 2 definitely felt just kind of like a continuation of season 1, kind of more of season 1 more than anything else. And the start of season 3 really does establish that time has passed. These characters have changed, which is great. And we like all these actors. They're really fun to be around. We like this world. And what we don't want is to feel any kind of apathy to the storytelling. And I think the key with that is trying to change things. And again, I think they did that. But along the way, we got a lot of those criticisms once again, namely that 11 always saves everyone. And if it's not for 11, everyone's effed. More or less, was true once again. I think the cast is probably ballooned to as big as it possibly can be. I'm really glad we have Erica. And I'm really glad that Steve is still here. And I love Maya Hawke's Robin. I love her addition. Mm-hmm. But I think we're good. I think that's enough. And I'm kind of happy the buyers left because I've had enough Will.
Will
for the rest of the time.
Will needs to get a new stylist, man. Tough look for him dressing like a 5-year-old all season.
Wait. Let me do Will's favorite line. He's here.
Yeah, it's funny because Will, in some respects, I think got a little bit more to do last season, only because he had that one episode where he was just like wilding out in basically like exorcism type episode. And I guess in the first half of the season, he got to be sad about his friends being interested in girls and him not necessarily being at that point yet, or maybe not being interested in girls in general. We don't know. But yeah, I feel like the additions to this season of Robin and just kind of Max being brought in a little bit more breathes a nice and also obviously Lucas's sister, I'm forgetting her name, Erica. I feel like they really added a nice and even Murray and Alexi. I felt like they added
these
awesome. Really these nice breaths of fresh air. while you got to hang with these people you really liked. The plot doesn't necessarily interest me a lot. Like I'm not. It's a monster that kind of unexplained how it got there, why it's there.
Mind
And
Flayer.
yeah, and it kind of leaves off there, even in like the post credit scene where it's like, okay, this monster's there, but we still don't really know anything about these monsters other than we thought we closed the portal, but I guess we didn't, or they were trying to open the portal. But what I liked most was just, again, like the moments you got where it's the gang doing stuff, like Steve and Robin being on drugs. Like, I don't know what drugs they were on. It could have been ecstasy. It could have been just like a truth serum of some sort.
I think it was supposed to be a truth serum, obviously, but it was playing like they were tripping balls to a certain extent.
That was hilarious, and I loved seeing them just like be goofy and like running around. I loved it, the never-ending story scene that you started the pod with. That's one of probably the most memorable moments of the season.
Dusty Bun.
I think what the show does really well is it brings in these 80s references and nostalgia, and it got a little campy at times this season, but it does it in a way that you're still like, oh, that was awesome. Like the Terminator type Russian dude who Hopper was fighting throughout the season. I thought that was a great like ongoing thing. That was just like fun to watch.
I don't think we needed to have the mayor explicitly call him the Terminator though. Like he's clearly a riff on the Terminator. Good. You don't need to explicitly tell us.
The mayor was a tough character for me. I mean, I know he's supposed to be like one of those over the top 80s villains, but like
right.
a little too much for me.
Yeah, I mean he's played by K.R.I.T Ellis, who just follows up this 80s star run they've had with Paul Reiser, who makes a cameo again, and Winona Ryder, and of course Sean Astin. They're just. I mean, who are they going to bring in next? That's probably the most exciting part of season 4 for some older folks.
Let's get us some Mark Hamill in there or something like that.
Oh, shit. That'd be sick.
That'd be a great villain. Yeah, what? And just kind of been looking through the season and what I really like stands out. What really stands out is just the settings. So like we talked about in the first review, the first half of the season, were just so great. That fight in the carnival or the fair, whatever it was, like the cabin, the mall as like a driving force at the beginning of the season for like hanging out, and then as like this battleground for the second half of the season was just so smartly done. And I feel like all of the characters kind of got their own moments, which I think works out, and just overall really, really well done. You mentioned Hopper's death. Do you think he's dead?
I really want him to be.
Yeah.
They put a lot of work at the end into actually setting it up that they've moved on. There was grief, Then just immediately tease that he's probably alive in the cell in Russia. Just kind of annoyed me, just because they wouldn't actually commit to it. I know David Harbour's super popular, and like he loves this show. This is the biggest thing of his career, obviously. And I guess if they did bring him back, it would be a new dynamic by default. But I would just be more interested in him not being there anymore, and 11 continuing to grow on her own and with Will and all that. So if I had to guess, though, I think they will bring him back, and it's probably not actually totally planned yet by the Duffers, to be honest. But yeah, I think they do bring him back. I just wish they wouldn't.
Yeah, it's going to get hard because a lot of these people are going to be getting a lot more work to do. Finn Wolfhard is going to be in the new Ghostbusters movie. Obviously,
the Goldfinch.
The Goldfinch, yep. We have Millie Bobby Brown, who's like blowing up and is in Godzilla and all these movies. I have a feeling she's going to be quite busy. It's going to be hard to keep this cast together, so it's smart that they broke them up so that they can kind of like tape things separately and don't necessarily need to all be together.
Arrested Development, season 4.
Yeah, exactly. Pieced together. But I also do feel like that's going to kind of bring in this new feeling of the show where it's like this, it's a little more disjointed and not as much about like the togetherness of town.
Speaking of Millie, obviously she's so great as a performer, and what stood out to me is just how effortless it seems her performance is. And that actually kind of made me like judge Sadie Sink, who plays Max, a little bit, because I was like, I almost feel like I could see the seams a little bit. I could tell she was acting. And I think she's good. Like I like the character. I like everything she does. But I was like, oh, I can kind of tell you're acting a little bit. That's a little unfair because you're playing off of Millie, who's just so great.
Yeah, she does so much with her face, and obviously it's weird that 11 can't talk that well yet.
Yeah,
Really
still
struggling
out.
with that skill, but she does so much just non-verbally to portray emotion. It's really impressive. I also hope. I hope that they're able to keep the show going because I find it interesting. I feel like if they didn't have that after credit scene, this could have been a really good series finale.
Definitely.
So I almost kind of wish they kind of left it there because if that's the way it wrapped up, I think that's great. So we'll see. Netflix obviously wants to keep cashing them checks though. So
yeah, they said 40.7 million accounts watch 70% of at least one episode in the first 4 days. Crazy. Which Nielsen says is about 20% increase from season 2. So yeah, they don't want this show to go away. And the question would be maybe years from now if they keep this brand going with a whole new cast down the line, make a 90s show. Who knows?
Yeah, that's an interesting idea. Last question. Thoughts on Billy's arc throughout the season?
Definitely better Billy, all around Billy stuff than season 2, where he didn't really do much of anything. I did think the overall stuff with like 11, seeing him at the beach as a kid and his mom, and it just didn't really make much sense. And I feel like a really weird way to hamstring an emotional beats as a way for her to break through and redeem Billy in a certain sense, like crack through the Mind Flayer's spell of it all. I don't know if that made a whole lot of sense, or at least wasn't done in a convincing enough way to let you to suspend disbelief totally. So I thought that was kind of a weird distraction when it came up.
Yeah.
But yeah, I like I said before, I think Dacre Montgomery's quite winning in the role, and I'm looking forward to seeing him do more stuff. He's actually Australian, but I think he does a good Midwest American guy.
No, definitely. I thought his arc was definitely better. I agree the redemption at the end was a little strange, but it seems like in a way Elle's powers are shifting a little bit, especially now that the Mind Flayer has been inside her legs, so maybe that's changed things. Sure. But definitely interesting. Stranger Things season 3 wrapping up on a high note for sure. What do we got for next week, Dave?
So next week we'll talk about those Emmy noms that are coming out probably the day you're listening to this, as well as we're going to go through Quentin Tarantino's filmography and go deep on QT in light of Once Upon a Time in Hollywood coming out in 2 weeks. And then the following week, we'll talk about all the stuff coming out at the end of this week. Lion King, Farewell. Marvel's announcing stuff at San Diego Comic-Con. Big Little Lies is ending season 2. Max O'Cream dropping an album I'm really hyped for. So plenty of stuff coming up. But Quentin Tarantino next week. Get ready.
Hit that subscribe button if you're watching on YouTube, soundcloud.com/nostalgiapod to find all the other ways to listen to the podcast. And go on Twitter @nostalgiapod. Give us a follow there. We love you. We appreciate you. Peace out.